Okay, welcome everyone to today's topic, the ins and outs of telemedicine and how to get started in your practice. Our presenter today is Dr. Ernie Ward, DVM CVFT, who is a graduate of the 1992 class at the University of Georgia Veterinary School. He is an internationally recognized veterinarian known for his work in the areas of general small business practice, the life extension and longevity, practice management and leadership, long-term medication monitoring, and the special needs of senior dogs and cats. Dr. Ward is the founder of Seaside Animal Care, a national practice of excellence, award-winning small animal veterinary clinic, and Doggone Healthy, a practice dedicated to nutritional, behavioral, and integrative care in Calabash, North Carolina. He was awarded the Speaker of the Year at both the North American Veterinary Conference in Orlando and Western Vet Conference in Las Vegas. He has spoken at every major North American veterinary conference, as well as throughout Europe, South America, and Asia, and has been a guest lecturer at most U.S. veterinary schools. We welcome Dr. Ward.
Oh, thank you so much. And I want to thank you guys for taking time out of your busy schedule today to spend it with me. I also want to thank Assisi Animal Health and Calmer Canine for sponsoring this. I just from the outset want to say I thought it was remarkable that a non-telemedicine company would be interested in sponsoring an event like this. In fact, when I was working with Nicole Westfall, many of you may know her, she's been in the industry for several years. And, she said, well, what do you think vets need to hear? And this just organically came out. It was like, look, we're struggling with how to maintain revenues, maintain contact in a world of social distancing, what's beyond curbside service. So I really want to applaud Assisi Animal Health for sponsoring this when it's a little bit outside of their normal domain. So thanks again for doing that. If you are interested, I'll go ahead and start with some slides here. And we'll be taking questions throughout. So if you have a question, just park it over in the chat session. We will be getting to those just as soon as we can. I want to leave plenty of time for your questions, especially you may have some technical questions around telemedicine equipment and just how we're actually integrating this stuff. But please follow me on social media, Instagram, pretty active there. And I do videos, which we're going to reference a lot of them today because over the past 3 or 4 months, we've really been putting out a lot of content on ways to help you and your practice during this time. So off-label veterinary news is on, of course, Instagram, and YouTube is the main place for that. Follow me on LinkedIn, Facebook, and so forth. And so again, if you're into that sort of thing, I'm out there just trying to help. And I think, today I want to, over the next 30 to 45 minutes, and Assisi Animal Health has been gracious to give us more time. So we've got as much time as we need to go in depth and answer your questions. So don't think that there's a hard out. I've allocated, a solid hour and 15 for this because it's very important to me. But I want to talk about what we need to be doing now, and not just in terms of telemedicine, but actually in securing your online presence, because we have seen a surge in especially younger pet parents who are using online resources to search and find and book. So it's really important that we have all of that tidied away. I want to talk about the state of current veterinary practice with curbside and different things and some of the challenges that we're facing. Then what are we talking about when we talk about telemedicine, telehealth, teletriage? And then I want to leave plenty of time for us to discuss. And again, so park those questions. The first thing you need to do now, and I will tell you, having canvassed literally hundreds of clinics' websites over the last couple of years, this stuff is not being taken care of. I work, I also have another company called Vertical Vet. It's a GPO, a group resource community, actually based out of Charlotte, North Carolina. We've got about 1,100 clinics, and we did some work with their websites a couple of years ago. We found that the vast majority were deficient in one of the most simple things, and that was their Google business page wasn't accurate. So I'm going to encourage you right now to take a note and have someone do it yourself, but you're going to go to business.google.com. Your information should automatically load if you're actually in the system. If not, you need to go ahead and secure, create, and make sure that it is up to date. I think that too few clinics actually pay attention to this. I was speaking with a veterinarian during when the lockdowns, shutdowns, quarantine period started, And I just did a quick thing on my phone when I was on the phone. She's like, what do I need to do? You know, how are we going to deal with this? And she wanted to focus on curbside medicine. And the first thing I identified when I just typed in her clinic's name was that she wasn't reporting that they were closed. They had changed in their hours. And so this is really important that you keep up to date. It's incredibly easy to do. You need to make sure that you are looking at it for sure. Also on your website right now, there should be a splash or some kind of indicator that says, hey, we are doing business differently. We will go into some detail during this presentation, but right now when I go to your website, I want to know that you are doing a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about, that you're keeping me, my pets safe, your staff safe. How are you operating? You know, what can I do? Can I order? Do you deliver to my house? That needs to be preferably a splash, but somehow there needs to be a banner that you can click and quickly get access to information on how you're handling the current situation. And so let's jump into some of the things that you should be sharing. And you'll notice over on the over here on this side, these are some of these videos I'm talking about. But at the very beginning of this, you know, back at the 1st of March, end of February, I made this quick little video and blog. And actually NAVC, you know, I'm a columnist for today's Veterinary Business as well. And, you know, we picked this up and this got shared with a lot of vets. So hopefully you've seen it, but I really walked through some of the things that we should have been doing 3 or 4 months ago, but it still is salient and relevant today. So definitely check out these things. You can also find all this stuff at drernieward.com. So, you know, if you just want to find one place where you can click on videos and read all the transcripts, that's a great place to start, just drernieward.com. But you need to be sending out emails on your website, social media channels that you are open for business if it is safe and you are able to open. Right now, many places in the country, I mean, you know, most veterinarians, since we were classified as essential, didn't go into full shutdown mode, but they did alter hours, they did offer services offered and so forth. So if there's any question in your community that you're back open fully, you need to share this message out there. You know, I was talking to a vet last week and she says, well, Ernie, everybody knows that vets were essential businesses and we're open. I just disagree. Most people don't have a clue that veterinary businesses were deemed essential by most governments and municipalities. And most people don't know really what's going on. All they see is the news where businesses are shuttering their, you know, doors and they're not open for business and, you know, they have to do deliveries. So I want you to be clear and, you know, as you'll hear me say this, over communicate with your clients during this time. Again, we talked about the Google listing for sure. And this is something too that I was talking with another veterinarian a couple of weeks ago when they were beginning to resume normal operating hours and services. You know, I said, look, she said, well, we did that. We put it on our Instagram page and Facebook page. I said, that's great, but I still think you should send out an email explaining exactly the steps. And we're going to go into some detail today, but you need to repeat this because not everybody opens your emails. Not everybody actually is going to be responding to sort of what we're doing. You'll have to apologize. There will be dogs in the background. I am a veterinarian after all. The other part of this, the communications, are what services. And I think that this is something too that gets overlooked during something this significant. Okay, the entire world has basically been disrupted. Businesses have been shutting down and completely, you know, altering the way they communicate with the public. And so a lot of times I think that you need to over communicate, as we mentioned, but number 2, what services are we offering? I just don't think you can over communicate that. If you're starting to do, you know, spays and neuters again, which many of us are, then you need to tell people that. And, you know, look, put something on your Instagram post. Did you have a pandemic pet, right? We want to meet them because there's this entire, you know, I've been calling this the lost generation. There are millions of pets that were adopted during the pandemic that 2 things happened. Number 1, they weren't able to get into their normal puppy and kitten immunization schedules. And number 2, they weren't able to socialize normally. And these are 2 challenges. Now, CC Animal Health, we did a special series on this just last month on like, how can we socialize pets during this pandemic? But right now you need to double down on your messaging and say, look, we know that you might have missed out on the messages that, you know, you need to have parasite prevention, you need to have heartworm tests and so forth. So really, really get involved and communicate. What do people want to know right now is how they're going to be safe. Many pet parents are very worried that they're going to get sick when they travel outside of their home. And don't forget, 40% of US pet owners are in their 60s, which puts them in the highest risk, most vulnerable population. So you've got lots of 65-year-old pet parents who are sitting at home going, I'm nervous to go out to the grocery store, to take my car in, to take my pet to the veterinarian. So one of the things we can do to help allay those fears is just tell them what we are doing. Again, if you go back and look at some of these earlier articles and videos that I've been, making over the past 3 or 4 months, I do give some good steps, and, whether it's plexiglass, shields, whether it's markers on the floor, whether it's, specialized hours. I mean, definitely go back and look at some of those ideas that I've been, certainly recommending, and we're starting to see other businesses implement across the country. But also, how are we, how does this work? I will say right now, I would get on your iPhone, get a digital camera. We can talk about equipment later, but I would walk somebody through the steps. Good friend of mine, a great pet owner, he's in California, so his dog got sick. He just made the appointment, but no time during the appointment scheduling process, and this was by the phone, did anybody tell him what to expect when he got there. When he showed up, he just got his cat, it was his cat, and walked up to the door as normal, where he was greeted with a sign that said, "Go back to your car and call us." Well, this could have been communicated ahead of time. This could have been communicated in an email, a text message, during the phone conversation. So I really want to make sure that we are telling people what's going to happen when they roll up to our clinics. And I think a video is great. You can put this on your website. You can put this on your Facebook page. You can do this wherever. Share it on Instagram. But make sure that people understand that it is different, because for many of us, it is different. And so I know that one of the biggest barriers to people is change. And when they encounter change, they are reluctant to embrace it. And so for us, we want to say, hey, this is all cool. We got this locked down. We are good. All right. So again, I would encourage you to use video whenever possible. Virtual check-in, online scheduling. I mean, I think you've heard me and others talk about this for years. Ordering, this is also a really important time to make sure your online store is easy to use, and you should be critiquing it. What are the steps? What are the checkout steps? I mean, is it something that's difficult to do and figure out? How do you give payments? Can you expect delivery, and so forth? We've been working a lot at Vertical Vet on touchless payment systems. There's a lot of cool stuff happening, and we'll focus on telemedicine today. One of the things that we'll talk about why this is so important is because human telemedicine has really taken off during this time. In addition to human safety, though, they want to know that their pet is going to be kept safe. We've seen these cases about cats. I had to make several videos about pets testing positive for coronavirus, SARS-CoV-2, what that means, what it doesn't mean, why you shouldn't be afraid. But there are a growing number of people that are very worried that their cat in particular is going to get COVID-19 when they are at your clinic. So I think it's really important that you communicate openly about the ways you're keeping pets safe in your clinic. I do think that vets are sort of minimizing this for fear. They go, well, if I say that, we're taking all these precautions, that's going to indicate that there could be a problem. There's so much misinformation on the internet. I mean, if you don't believe me, just go to some of these feline Facebook pages. And I mean, this is being talked about actively, about the reservoir aspect of felids, about whether or not cats are passing it amongst each other. There was a recent posting about this lady who was so worried that her cat had contracted COVID-19. Completely, this was not correct. This is just made up. But when it recently had its teeth cleaned, right? So it came back with a cough. Get the picture, right? We've got to over communicate at this time. Also, make sure that, if you're doing any scheduling changes or sanitizing measures, make sure that you really communicate with that, because people want to know that you are like doubling down on hygiene. So just tell them, show them, do whatever. And again, addressing the misinformation. Just this last week, the past few days, we had the USDA confirm or actually negate the Duke University positive COVID-19 test result from a pair of pugs owned by human physicians in Durham, North Carolina. And so, I had to make a quick video and write an article to sort of explain that. You got to be out there. So how can we encourage wellness exams and vaccines during this next period? Because that is my biggest worry, is that, how can we keep people coming back? right now, most vet clinics have seen a tremendous surge in appointments. And so a lot of vets aren't taking this seriously, like, oh, we got this. You know, vets, we're bulletproof once again. We show that we're recession proof. We're inelastic when it comes to these external, challenges. And I just don't think that's true. I think there was pent up demand. I think we're seeing a swell in appointments, but I really question what's going to happen. If unemployment remains at record levels for the next couple of months, it's really not going to take but a few more weeks to really shatter a lot of people's ability to just make the rent. And if you look around the globe, what's happening, this is becoming a pressing issue. And then number two, if we have a recurrence, a surge, a second peak, if you will, of coronavirus in the United States and human population, that's also going to really affect, I think, our recovery. So I think we need to be very vigilant, and we need to be very cognizant that people aren't just going to show back up at the vet when we send them a postcard, right? So I think that we really need to explain to them, what's going to happen when they're at our clinic. So we've kind of gone into that. And I'll review, curbside service. I mean, most of you guys are already doing this. If you are, let us know in the chat. But the reality is all this is done is we've just taken the dog and the person, the pet and the person, and separated them to reduce the chance of interhuman or interpersonal transmission of SARS-CoV-2. And that's fine. That's fine. I just don't think that we're optimizing it. And the first thing I'm going to encourage everybody to do, and I want to know in the chat if you're doing this, is I want you to do video conferences when that person shows up. So when you take that pet inside, the minimum a level of care that I think you should offer is a video conference. So just take your cell phone and just, have it on a tripod and just turn it on and say, let's FaceTime or Skype or Zoom or whatever it is you're comfortable with. And let's talk about what I'm seeing with your pet right now. I really, really do worry about this. Why do I worry about this? I think that, hey guys, we haven't seen summer yet. Okay. If you've been talking to any of your colleagues in the UK, there is a record-setting heat wave going on right now, and curbside service is not going so well. Okay. So let's just be clear that during thunderstorms, snowstorms, right? If this continues on into the fall and winter, right? During hot weather, curbside service becomes less appealing. And while we're fine, there are a lot of clients that are going, it's going to be 100 degrees out there today. I'm not going to sit out there in that hot car while my cat gets its vaccines. That is a real dilemma, okay? There's also, what you see online, especially around some of the cat, is that people are worried that their cat is really stressed out when they're not in their presence. I mean, we've taken tremendous strides as a profession to help decrease fear and anxiety in our pets and their pet parents. And yet right now, we're basically saying, hey, give us your dog or cat, see you later, and you're disappearing into a black hole of anxiety, right? And so we've got to make sure to be as transparent as possible. That's why I think we're going to have to get better. I think we're going to get more creative, as I've been trying to lay out, especially, I think we'll touch a little bit on this today. But I think that we're going to have to be in the presence. I mean, veterinary medicine is a social medicine. I have all these years, you've heard me say it is the most social of all the medical professionals. Why? Because we are dealing with a patient by proxy, right? There's a third party involved here. There's a caregiver that we must directly communicate to actually achieve compliance and adherence. So this is why I've always said this is the most social, and social interaction is critical to our success, in my opinion. So I just don't see us forever being able to say, okay, we'll see you in a little bit. I'm going to take your cat away from you and do a bunch of stuff and bring him back. I just don't see that as satisfying the long-term issue here. So let's shift a little bit now today towards telemedicine. And again, I think there's a lot of solutions. Please go back and check out some of those articles I've been writing and videos. I think there's going to be creative ways to use plexiglass barriers in exam rooms. I mean, I think we're really going to have to just take this seriously until A, a vaccine, B, a treatment, or C, herd immunity occurs. And all of those things, in my understanding of the current science, are going to be months and months into the future. But what has happened in the US is that early on during this, the current administration told Medicare, Medicaid that we want you to discourage, especially the most vulnerable population, older people, people with pre-existing medical conditions, respiratory, diabetes, and so forth, from going into hospitals, ER rooms, and even physicians' offices. So we want you to start encouraging telehealth, telemedicine, televisits, and we're going to pay for it. And this was a big, big move because telehealth really had not been embraced wholly by Medicare, Medicaid, and how they did the payments, right? So up until now, this wasn't an option. In fact, many times you would have a steep copay or you'd have to pay out of your pocket if you wanted to do telemedicine. So just be aware that now millions of people, including people like my mother, who's in her late 70s, who does have pre-existing conditions, making her very vulnerable to SARS-CoV-2, she has been using telemedicine. So now suddenly there's this groundswell of experience, and this has unlocked the opportunity, I think, for many veterinarians, because people now aren't so afraid of it. They've actually done it. You know, my own family has been engaging in telemedicine. I have 2 older daughters, and this is how they've been doing most of their stuff. Okay. And so just quickly, without getting into a big, thing, I did serve on the AVMA telemedicine committee, several years ago. The guidelines that you currently see, you can go check it out on avma.org. And so, we spent an excessive amount of time on the terminology, but in simplest terms, and again, this is really simplifying it, telehealth is just a general term that allows you to give general advice. Okay, so this isn't a specific recommendation. This isn't a diagnosis. This isn't a treatment plan. This is just like, in general terms, like when we post articles on our websites or write them about ear infections or atopy, that is a form of telehealth. We are communicating in general terms, not specifics. The next level is what most of us have been, I guess, exposed to over the past couple of years. And during this pandemic, we've seen just an onslaught of new players.
Dr. Ward, have you hit your mute button?
Oh, sorry. When did you lose me?
About 1 minute ago.
Okay, good. So telehealth?
Yep.
Okay, so telehealth, general advice, general term. Just that's the overarching thing. As I mentioned, and I apologize if I got muted, but that's if we even post a general atopy blog post or article on our website, technically that's a form of telehealth, giving general advice, not specifics. What most of us are familiar with is teletriage. Again, a veterinarian or an RVT, LVT, CVT speaks to a client typically after hours, and the phone call can only break into one of 2 ways, right? It can say, this is an emergency, immediately go see a veterinarian, or this does not sound like an emergency, you may be able to wait until the morning. They cannot make a diagnosis, they cannot make a prescription, they cannot give a treatment recommendation, okay? So again, it's sort of like the old pager calls that we took. Most of us are familiar with that if you've been in practice, as long as I've been in. So we would call and we'd try to assess quickly over the phone, we need to see you immediately or not. Okay, and now though, this is where we're headed. And this is telemedicine. And we're already there. And I think, we're going to talk about, you're already there to a large extent, but this is where we can do an examination. This is where we can make a diagnosis. This is where we can do a treatment. We can give prescriptions. And this is what's happening right now to millions of people who are encountering telemedicine for the first time, especially by way of the, Medicare, Medicaid announcement from the current administration. And again, here's a great article. Again, this also was put out by Today's Veterinary Business, but you can find it on my website at Dr. Ernie Ward. And this just really goes into some detail on what's actually happening out there. So here's where the legal challenge is. The primary legal challenge is the VCPR. And the reality is this: you cannot establish a VCPR over the internet. Now, there have been a few exceptions in a few states during the pandemic, but by and large, most states, including a state like mine, North Carolina, I cannot diagnose, I cannot do a quote unquote virtual examination, I cannot make a prescription or treatment recommendation for a client I have not seen. I do not have an existing veterinary client-patient relationship with, right? So this is where everybody has gotten stuck because, you know, when we wrote, and look, I did have several of the dissenting opinions in the AVMA telehealth, you know, our final recommendation, our booklet, and our website and so forth. But here's the deal. We got stuck on trying to get new clients in by a VCPR, completely overlooking what about existing clients? And that's really where I want people to focus, right? And one of the other things that kind of confused people was the FDA said, and look, this was aimed at production veterinarians who are dealing with livestock, right? So they said, look, we're going to remove some of the prescribing requirements. You don't have to necessarily go out and see that herd or that flock to prescribe certain medications. So the FDA eased off of it. Now, really, it didn't address small animal veterinary medicine specifically. It didn't address what the states already may have in play. So for example, in North Carolina, it didn't really help me out as a small animal practitioner trying to deal with a dog or cat that I'd never seen before who had a skin problem, okay? However, again, we can do this if we have seen them. So if your state definition states that you have an established VCPR, if you've seen them, done a physical examination within a year, this is the thing that's so frustrating. You could have been doing telemedicine this entire time. You know, again, you say, well, why are all these companies making a big fuss about VCPR? Because these companies are trying to grow a business, and they know that they want to be able to access people that they don't see, that they don't have a relationship with in the real world. So if you wonder why there's been all this pressure around establishing a VCPR virtually, it's because it's allowing a third-party provider, if you will, someone not me or you, who's actually seen Buster, right, or Chloe. So that allows them to establish it, to examine, diagnose, prescribe. But we have really, independent practitioners in particular, and even corporate entities, we've really overlooked the fact that if we've got this established VCPR, if we deem it appropriate, we can do it. So I do want to talk about, you know, and this is from a CNBC article that recently came out. I mean, this stuff is surging, but there's a couple of conditions that I think you should be tapping into now. And I don't care how basic you make it. This can be FaceTime stuff. This can be Zoom calls, but really these are the top ones. Skin allergies. Where are we? We're June. You guys we're being overrun in I'm in the Southeast United States. We're being overrun with atopy, right? And flea allergy, insect bite, dermatitis. And so now this is a great opportunity for people who are reticent or hesitant or unable to visit me in the real world. Well, this is a great way to say, well, all right, well, let's see your dog, right? And there's a couple of ways to do it, which I'll talk about. There's both live video. There's actually, you know, sort of, what we call asynchronous chat. And then there's going to be people that would send you a video. And again, this would be another form of asynchronous analysis, but we'll talk about that in a second. The other thing too is behavior consultations. Anybody that, if you've followed me for the past 20 years, you know that I've said the golden way to diagnose and treat behavior problems is to have that client videotape it and send it to me. This is what I have done. This is what many of you have done for the past 20 years. Honestly, as soon as these things started showing up in people's pockets, 10, 12 years ago, all bets were off. It was like, they would say, clients say, well, she really gets agitated when somebody comes to the door. Show me. I get to see the triggers, right? I get to see how the dog behaves, what it's actually doing leading up to maybe, and of course with today's little security cameras, the sky is the limit. But things like OA, so now you're dealing with chronic conditions. These are also great tools, or great applications for these new telemedicine tools. So I'm looking at that dog who is chronically limping, and I want to see them again on a checkup, a follow-up, right? And they're not coming in. They're calling our offices many times and saying, hey, Buster's limping again. He needs a refill on his NSAID. And we're just kind of, well, many times we refill it, especially if it's a legitimate thing. But here's a way to do an additional layer of care to actually see the limping. Many veterinarians say, Ernie, I hate when those limping calls come in because I can't tell if it's OA or a blown cruciate. I totally get it. But guess what? With a video camera, a video consultation, this is allowing me now to start to quickly, and many times pretty accurately assess the gait. I've had multiple calls, like many of you, where we've just had the person say, okay, all right, have him walk down a little bit further. Okay, can you trot him a little bit? And wow, this is so much different than when you see them in your exam rooms. And how many of us over the years, every OA, every gait abnormality, limping dog that came in, the first thing we did is we tried them outside, right? Because we wanted to see them in action. Well, this is a way to do that for sure. So I just want us to think about, how can we, with existing clients, begin to offer telemedicine within an existing VCPR, not growing our practice as far as bringing in new clients, but actually enhancing the relationship and communication tools and conduits that we already have. Now, here's the thing too. Sometimes vets forget, if you start one of these calls and you say, whoa, this is not appropriate, you can say, you know what, Mrs. Smith, you can be the teletriage person. Hey, listen, I don't like the way he's breathing right now. I don't like the way the eyes look. I don't like the way the limping looks, whatever it may be. You can say, we need to see him immediately, or whatever's appropriate, right? So there's an out. It's not like once we commit to this telemedicine consultation that, well, that's it, and I've been hearing so many stories over the past several years as I've really become an advocate for telemedicine. And they go, hey, look, the dog's got separation anxiety. I need to see him in my clinic. Well, maybe not, right? I mean, are you really seeing that separation anxiety when they're in your clinic? And I think we can do better. So that, again, I can't wait to see what you guys are talking about in the chat for sure. Okay, because we're going to get into some questions here in just a second, because I'm almost done with the kind of presentation part. So let's talk about what we should be doing right now. Number one, if you do not have an online store, an online pharmacy, please explain to me why. Maybe not during today's webinar, but please explain to me why. What are the barriers? How can we make this easier for you? I mean, this is one of the things like when we started Vertical Vet 3 years ago, that was one of the things we wanted to do, is make sure that we could align with partners that would make stuff like this easy for vets. And so you've got resources, whether it's through companies like us or others, that they can hook you up and make this simple, and it's really easy. But I've really gotten frustrated because during this pandemic, people are like, well, I'm just going to have them call, something that rhymes with Dewey.com, right? Or, one of those types of things. Well, you're now potentially offloading an entire suite of products outside. So I really, as independent practitioners, we need to try to keep control of these sales as much as possible. The biggest question I get is, okay, what about all these practices that are already out there, right? Should I just use an existing service? There's tons of them out there. You can pay for them, right? Or should I just use a Skype and a FaceTime? I would say it really depends. I would encourage you, as you begin to experiment, that you just start out simply with just using FaceTime, Skype, Zoom, Google Meet, whatever, because A, it's free. B, you're trying to figure out, does this really work for my style of practice? Because this isn't for every veterinarian. I mean, sitting across from a camera, even as we're doing right now during this unprecedented time, this is not really my style, right? Like talking to a camera and talking to people all over the country, I'd rather be there with you right now, watching your body language, seeing if I'm reaching you. So it may not be a perfect fit for you. I think it probably is for most veterinarians, for most of us, and we can adapt to it. And I think we're going to have to. But the reality is, we need to make sure that it works. And then if you see it works, what's the volume? Because some of these paid services can get expensive. And then some of these paid services are also linked with other providers of product sales and so forth that we have to be really careful, because, these things can be acquired, they can be selling off data. I mean, there's a lot of sort of fine print that you need to carefully evaluate before you just sign up with an existing third-party provider. How much and how to charge? When I wrote the first article back at the March 17 on the coronavirus catalyst for telemedicine, and also after that, Mark Cushing, the attorney, he was inspired by that article and wrote a follow-up, which he was gracious enough to allow me to put on my website. So if you definitely want to check out Dr. Ernie Ward, because we kind of talk about how important this really is. But one of the things that I think Mark and I were really trying to impress upon people is this can really go one of two ways. And that is, number one, if we devalue telemedicine, that is, if we charge significantly less than an in-person visit, then we've devalued it, and we may incentivize bargain hunters, right? We may incentivize people who are out there saying, I want to get this cheapest I can, so I'm going to do a telemedicine consult, right? And I don't know that that's what really telemedicine is best designed for. There are certain case uses, I believe, that are great. Behavior, of course, I think is right up there at the top of the list with maybe skin, OA, some chronic follow-up stuff, right? So there's a short list of things. I'm not evaluating respiratory distress in a cat, okay? So I think that if we start to say, well, that's only $20, just hypothetically speaking, and your regular exam is 65, well, then we've devalued the time of the veterinarian. So what I wrote in that first article is that you should, especially remember, this is early on. Okay, this is 3 months ago or so. I said, hey, I think if you're going to be experimenting with this, you should charge about the same. Okay, you may have a different opinion. That's fine. Pricing is going to be personal. I get it. But I think you have to be very cautious. If you devalue this, if it's deeply discounted, you're going to incentivize that behavior. And again, are you incentivizing reducing your revenues, which that's really not the point of telemedicine. Telemedicine is there to provide convenience. Case in point, most of you, if you've encountered telemedicine right now, you've already identified something that I've been saying here. It makes sense. Oh, wow, your copay was the same for your telemedicine visit as an in-clinic visit. That's how almost all of the human medical insurance providers decided that they would pay. They said, hey, we're going to charge the same. Doctor, we're paying that doctor her 15 minutes in that office. So, the client, the patient is going to pay the same. So just be aware that there's pressure on the human side to say these things are more equal than they are different. So I want us to be critically analyzing the charging aspect. You can also schedule these telemedicine hours. I think that's also something that people tend to just overlook, is the fact that, hey, I don't have to be available 24/7. I can do this on Tuesdays from 10 until 12 p.m. or whatever, right? I mean, you can do this when it works for you and your lifestyle and your scheduling. I've been working with a lot of vets, and we just, this goes back to my old Wednesday lull. And so that back in the day, we used to identify a lot of clinics. We'd look at when did they book the most appointments. And we typically found that Wednesday afternoons, early afternoons, for many, many clinics across the country, for whatever reason, just seemed to have little lulls, little spots that were thinner as far as appointment density. Maybe you'll find those types of opportunities, those little vacancies in your schedule, and you'll say, you know what, let's have one of my associates start to do a couple of these telemedicine consults. Just try. You do need to make sure, though, that whatever service, however you do this, that you're incorporating that video into the medical record. Now, currently, this is something that's not, this integration is not robust or rich. And there's a lot of reasons, because there's a lot of fences that are being put up by businesses to say, hey, you don't get access to our patient medical record, right? So they don't necessarily want every video, telemedicine, teletriage, being able to fly these things in there. But this is something you need to be looking for, because part of the future is that, that video consult, that text chat, that asynchronous consult, all that stuff is baked into the client record. And we're starting to see these moves going very, very quickly. The pace is accelerated on the human MR side, medical record side. And so they are, I think you're going to see that quickly translated over here. And again, as I've told you for years, if there is some service that you need out of your practice management software, you need to tell them. So this is the kind of stuff that you can say, hey, I need this, right? And then, of course, asking for client feedback. I think that too often we just roll out new stuff and we really don't, take the time to ask them, how do you think about this? How did that work? So after you do some of these experimentations with telemedicine, have one of your technicians, your receptionist, your office manager, just give some of those people a call and say, how'd it go? Well, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? How can we make this better? And I think you're going to be really surprised at some of the feedback you get. I've always believed in really communicating with, clients as openly as possible and using that information to drive my decisions and then how I develop. So if I'm going to come out with something new, it's usually based on a need that I gathered from my clients, and then I try to translate it into a solution. Okay, so I think we are getting close to being done. We are. So CC, before we get into the question discussion part of it, and again, start loading up those questions, because I really want to have this conversation about these topics, what you're doing, what's working, how we can help that. But they do have some great deals for veterinarians. And again, it is so, I guess, refreshing in a way, because here we are as veterinary colleagues having a conversation, and like the whole time it's not like, hey, and by the way, it's infomercial. SCC is a great company. If you don't know the Calmer Canine, it will change the way you look at behavior medicine, especially specifically around separation anxiety. So, and again, we've got tons of resources. If you go online, they've got all these great webinars. They've done these things called Webbies that are just a lot of fun. But definitely, if you're interested in learning more about their products, go to CC Animal Health. I'm sure that there'll be people on this call that can help you and maybe, connect with you. I don't know how I guess virtually they'll have an appointment with you, but tell you more about it. But if you don't understand the science of this stuff, this is really, the CC loop, my experience goes back nearly 20 years, 15, 16 years with that. And especially a lot of us in post-op wound healing, chronic, injury states, a lot of us were experimenting with this stuff way back in the day. So the science is pretty solid there. So definitely check out their specials for sure. Again, let's jump into some questions. So what's the best way to do this?
Okay, I will feed them to you.
Okay.
Because that will free you your time. And let's see, first of all, just to let you know that you are across the country from all these people on here. I can see them all signing in from West Coast to East.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
And I just hope everybody's safe. These are difficult times for all of us.
They are. Okay. Online stores like Covetrus take away too high of a percentage, especially if we try to keep our prices low as PME.
Yep.
Chewy. And then charge shipping, and then clients complain to the hospital if shipping issues are too long. Can we really, the thing is moving. Can we really compete with a large online pharmacy who's more of a well-oiled machine with bulk, decreased shipping, and getting products to our owners in 2 days?
Well, yes, that's a great question. And yes, you can be competitive, and you can be competitive on a couple of different ways. Number one, you're right. Sometimes on price pressures. This is going back to the old 1-800-PET-MEDS, days. So we know that they can, in a race to the drain, they can beat us because they just have more resources. They can, as they should say, they got more ammo in their belt. Okay. And that ammo is comprised of resources in the form of money. So they can just beat us to the drain. So we don't want to do that. We want to be very specific in our targeting. So the products that you sell online, it's not just go to our online store and buy whatever you want, because that's really what those models are predicated upon, right? It's just people showing up, browsing, and purchasing a bunch of stuff, and it works. But what we want to do is very targeted, precision marketing. And so it's not like you have to have everything in the world, but you want to recommend specific solutions to a specific patient. And I think that's the difference. The difference that we offer is that we say, here's what you need to do, and let me show you how easy this transaction is. And many of the times you can actually do this in the exam room, or certainly at your reception desk if you choose to do that. You can have people sign up and execute it quickly. So I do think we can compete. We cannot beat them on price. We may not be able to beat them on shipping and so forth, but we can beat them on bond. We have to have that personal recommendation, and then you say, here's how you do it. The one other element that we still have to a lesser extent is just the localism, right? There are a lot of pet parents that feel intensely loyal to us. And so I'm going to lean into that as much as possible. So, you'll see throughout lots of different messaging, things like, we offer this, we do that, buy it from us, that kind of messaging. I think it's really important to communicate. I think what actually happens is that during these times, what I'm really worried about is pet owners began to buy tons of stuff from some company that might rhyme with Dewey and others, and they suddenly now are being exposed to all this other stuff, and it is really hard to unlink those buying patterns, right? So now they go check, and they just start to buy their food, which parlays into preventives, which parlays into prescriptions. So you've got to be very aggressive right now. That's why I guess I wanted to overemphasize the fact that you need to have these things in place today. And too often vets just don't, or it's really not a great looking slick site. I will tell you again, this has nothing to do with Vertical Vet, but we've been really, really strategic with, and anybody, our group resource community, made, partnerships with companies that make things that look an awful lot like what people encounter at these bigger sites and offer most of the same things. So just check it out for sure. I know that's a very general answer, but we can be competitive. And I think it's essential that we are. But I think, as I've been saying for 15 years or so, we also have to understand this is probably, a long slope down. So the amount of revenue that, let's face it, right? Preventives were, double digit of total clinic revenue, 10 years ago, all across the country. And today you wind up finding, mid to low single digit revenue contributions from flea and tick preventives, for example. Great question. Tough answer, but we can do it.
Actually, no, great answer. Actually, you answered 3 questions while you were answering that one question, so that was wonderful. Are there any other questions that you would like? I'm asking our participants. They're still all on.
I have Carolyn. I see a hand raised, so I'm going to let Kristen Finn talk. Kristen, you can now talk.
Perfect.
Hi, Kristen.
Where'd she go?
I just, I'm trying to unmute you. 1 second. Maybe you're on mute and you raised your hand by accident.
I don't know if there's any way, if you could just put a Y or N in the chat box, but how many of you are currently today doing curbside service, or at least as I sort of in general outline of curbside service? If we could just get some kind of, I'd like to see some indication of what it is. We know what our 1,100 clinics are doing, but I'm just curious. Just you can hit a Y or N.
Okay.
And all of a sudden, all these hands are raising. So is all right, Dr. Ward, if I have a few people talk. Rosemary Niznik, you can now talk.
Oh, sorry, I bumped it by mistake. I was looking for questions, but I loved your webinar, Dr.
Hey, Rosemary, it's good to see you.
Yeah, you were a fellow UGA Bulldogs.
That's right. Everything's safe in your world?
Yeah, I'm in the Chicago area, in Wisconsin, Milwaukee area. So with the current situation, it's very stressful. I do relief work, and it's very stressful driving around to different practices, knowing if I can even get to work. So I'm going to keep a copy of my veterinary license in my car, and in case things happen. And I've been doing curbside for a few months now. Some clinics are starting to have the clients come in the office, and that's a little stressful, getting very close to them. I'm most stressed about that.
And Rosemary, we do a weekly podcast called the Veterinary Viewfinder, and we've really been focusing on the feelings and opinions of staff. And it's really, if you guys are into podcasts, you should check out some of the things we've been talking about for the past few months, because the staff really are bearing the burden of stress during this time. And as Rosemary said, and she's a fantastic veterinarian, even when we start to open it back up to allowing one client in with one pet at a time, it does create anxiety with our staff, because there's still a lot of uncertainty and worry about contracting COVID-19. So thanks for that, Rosemary. Stay safe.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I do listen to your podcast on my long drives home, so I really appreciate your podcast. They keep me awake. They're good, like 35 minutes, 45 minutes. I listen to 1 or 2 on the drive home, so I love them. Really
That's great. Go dogs.
Yeah, go dogs.
They are asking if you would specify the podcast again.
Oh yeah, sorry. It's called the Veterinary Viewfinder, so you can get it on any of your podcast things. Also, if you go to Dr. Ernie Ward, you can click on the links. We have all of them archived there on Dr. Ernie Ward. We are up to 182, 183. We're 3.5 years in. It's crazy.
Wow. Julie, do you have someone else? Oop.
I do have someone else. I have Julia Latosky. I'm allowing you to talk. You might have to unmute yourself first.
Yes, hi, Dr. Ward?
Yes.
Yes, hi, thanks for taking my call and my question. It's in regards to the veterinary patient-client relationship. I'm one of the doctors at a 15-doctor practice, and I, for health reasons, need to stay at home right now. but am trying to decide if I can incorporate telemedicine into the practice that I've been part of for 25 years.
Right.
In regards to the client-patient relationship, oftentimes in a group practice, we are seeing each other's patients because we're not there all the time. So would that extend the client-patient relationship if I'm seeing my colleagues?
This is such a great question, and one that's been debated for at least the last 5 years that I'm aware of, especially during the AVMA telemedicine committee. So this is the great loophole, right? And one of the loopholes that I provided back, 5, 6 years ago, whenever we were first starting up these discussions, was that, well, what is to prevent veterinarians from coming together and actually giving a 0.01% share? So we all own this massive practice, right, virtually, and we are all under the same ownership. So why can't I see your clinic, your client in California or whatever? And honestly, that's something that I'm just still shocked that hasn't been tried. Okay, but you're right. Typically, the state veterinary medical board allows us to see, prescribe over the phone for a client we personally have never physically seen. So you know the scenario, and we had a Dr. Nizik, who's a relief vet. She knows the scenario where basically you walk in and someone's calling for a refill on Exotic. Okay, you've personally never seen this dog for that indication, and maybe you've never even seen the dog, period. You're one of 15 vets. And yet you go, yeah, that's fine. Does it have a refill on it? Yeah, just go ahead and refill it, right? It's refilled under your name, blah, blah, blah. So yes, the question really becomes one of potential liability. I think that you're going to be shielded, but this is a question to talk to an attorney about. And people, I say, well, what about calling the veterinary medical board? Go right ahead, and they're just going to simply say no, right? Because if there's been no precedent law, then they don't really know how to rule on it and so forth. I think that for most of us that have 3 or 4 or 5, associates, this is already happening. I, would say this is just going to be part of the new normal. The reason that I was pushing so hard back at the beginning of March to try this was because states have really been relaxing their regulations around this. And also, when we go back to the original SARS pandemic in 2003, if you look at the case law that was established then around issues such as this, you found that the courts and the medical boards were much more lenient and relaxed during those times than they would be in normal times. So I still think this is the great opportunity to get a foothold in, to begin experimenting with it. I really, unless it's some egregious malpractice or negligence, I just don't think that a medical board is going to be heavy-handed on this. I think the public sentiment just won't allow for it. I mean, it's a pandemic, for crying out loud. So this is why I think now is the time. Also read Mark Cushing's paper that is on my website as well. And I think you'll start to see, I mean, he as a lawyer is just going, this is nuts, people. We have to accelerate, move forward, take this opportunity, begin to establish, your protocols. But I'm with you. And honestly, you're the exact candidate for this. Like that scenario you just said, if you were in my clinic, I would say, can you do this? Would you be willing to do this? This sounds like a great way to utilize your skill set and experience. Plus, you have the added benefit of being a trusted truth source, right? I mean, there's already thousands of clients in my existing data bank that are going to be like, oh yeah, I'd love to see you, So again, you can talk to a legal friend. You can definitely start to talk to people like Mark Cushing and email Mark. Mark is just a great resource for our profession. I just love the guy. And, talk to Mark. He'd be more than happy to address that question. Great question. Good luck.
Next question. Any suggestions for curbside efficiency, i.e. headsets for staff to communicate who's coming into the building, questionnaires prior to the appointment, a phone tech calling into the client ahead of time to get the S of the soap?
Yes. Oh boy, and you just nailed a lot of them. The first thing though is just over communicating to explain to them how to tell them when they arrive. I found that there are that's the biggest sort of time suck, because people show up and they don't quite know what to do. So they get out and they walk up or whatever. So really over communicate that and say, hey, when you're 5 minutes out, let us know. Or when you pull up, text us at this number. I've been advising many clinics just to have, a couple of cheap phones that they just text back and forth. They just keep them up front. Another thing too, that I found really clever at a couple of larger clinics out west was they were actually taking their parking lot and putting like A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and telling people that at this time they would, when they come in, to tell them the parking space that they're in, right? So that also can help make it more efficient. You don't go, are you Mrs. Smith? Are you Mrs. Smith? Right? So they come in and they text, I'm in parking lot or parking spot B or whatever. So I think those are great ways. The headset stuff does work really, really well. Again, my fear with those is inclement weather, when it gets too hot, when it gets too cold. So all of those things, I just don't see us as getting us further down. I personally, so let's keep playing the curbside game, but at the same time, simultaneously start really looking at what can you do in the interior. And this is why plexiglass shielding at your reception desk. I really have been talking to a lot of different designers for trying to get plexiglass to drop from the ceiling in my exam room, so that literally, it comes down and I can still do a full exam with the pet on the other side, and the owner can help restrain it if need be, right? I mean, obviously don't take that the wrong way, but I can start to interact with that client in a different way. So my tech and myself are on one side of the plexiglass, they can come on the other side, and I can have them again do my old, let's feel this, let's touch this, or whatever, and all of that stuff. We just don't know, but I love that. Another really important thing to do, check out. I made a video that I was surprised on LinkedIn, kind of caused a little bit of controversy, but I talked about, are we going to become the face mask police? But I really tried to offer some simple solutions to try to help encourage pet parents to wear face masks when they're in our clinics, right? Because this is becoming politicized. And look, I don't want to get into all of that today, but I would encourage you to check out, at least read the transcript of that. Are we going to become the face mask police? Because, these are other elements of how can we get people back into the clinic, because that's where I'll continue to stand my ground. Veterinary profession, this social medicine, we've got to figure out ways, how can we socially interact while socially distancing? So, but I loved all your things are spot on.
Okay, next. They're rolling in here. How do we get all VMBs to agree on an AVMA position statement if we want to offer telemedicine? As a relief doc, licensed in multiple states, it is very difficult. In the telemedicine consult determined by vet's home of record, where client is located at time of call-in, or where vet is located when traveling.
It is so messed up. This is the exact issue. And if you read through some of the dissenting opinions on that AVMA document, this is what you will keep hearing my voice come out on, because I believe that we needed to have reciprocal liability, meaning that you are liable for not only the state that you were practicing or licensed in, but also the state that the patient was in. Because see, this really sets up a high standard for the veterinary practice. Because as I mentioned during one of my comments, we could create sanctuary states. There could be a state that would be incentivized to reduce the barrier, or the penalties, if you will, for negligence malpractice via telemedicine, veterinary telemedicine or human telemedicine. And then everybody just goes there. They're licensed in, whatever state, we just won't name a state, but so you would come there, and then this would be the great place to practice from, because if something went awry, you did perform something that caused harm, the penalties, the liabilities were minimal. So, you're spot on. And I don't know what it is. I can tell you that, Mark is a great loud voice. I'm doing my part. And I think we're starting to make some headway. The FDA relaxing those rules, especially, again, I know this is for production medicine, but really did help set a precedent. And, what Mark and I kept saying was that now's the time to call and work with your state medical board. And look, I was largely ignored here in North Carolina, but regardless, we were trying to say these are issues that veterinarians are talking about, and we need some clarity on this. Now, most of the states just kind of closed the blinds and said, I'm not going to worry about it. A few states did say, we understand this is a real issue, and we want to encourage people to practice safely. So what I'm hoping is going to happen is that over the next couple of years, again, this will accelerate. This catalyst that's happening, right? This is once in a lifetime type stuff, but with millions of humans being exposed to telemedicine, I think the demand is just going to surge. And that's what I think the real driver is going to be, when millions of pet parents are sending in emails or signing petitions saying, we want to be able to do this. That's when the change really may tip over in our favor. But look, I would just say right now, play within the rules. work within the established VCPR. And I know you're in a different situation, multiple states and working around. I understand that. But for the vast majority of veterinarians, this is a great opportunity to extend their revenue and their services. And that's why I'm really pushing hard within the existing VCPR, because I think that's where we start. Great question.
There is a question that asks, are there any comments on particular telemedicine companies?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and absolutely not. I'm not going to get into that today. I don't work for any of them. I'm not endorsed or paid or whatever. I don't do that. So I would say really carefully, critically evaluate and look at the fine print. Look at who can access the data, because I'm telling you, who owns the company? Like, that's a really good start. If you go back and look at some of my stuff from a couple of years ago, there was a lot of M&A or merger and acquisitions where people were starting to sort of incorporate teletriage into companies that might have an online pharmacy. And so this is a perfect play, if you think about it, because even if you just shifted or shuttled somebody over to a non-prescription solution for anxiety, for example, well, suddenly now somebody's continue to make money. So yeah, I can't give you a specific recommendation. I can tell you there's some really good ones. There's some very innovative ones. I like the ones that stay neutral. There is one company that's doing something really exciting with artificial intelligence, which I like because, again, we continue to own the box of communication between that client. So these are the types of solutions I'm really looking for.
Okay, I will just tell you, since I get to see everything on my magical screen, that so far everyone has answered you and who has answered you has certainly said that they are doing curbside.
Yeah.
So your question about who's doing what to whom, that seems to be the answer for that. And
this is where really start to make sure to over communicate what those expectations are, because I'm telling you, my friend in California goes to a phenomenal clinic. I mean, on any other time, if we all talked about this clinic, you'd be like, oh wow, they're just the best. But he really did not have a great experience with his curbside service. As I mentioned, nobody told him what to expect. He gets out of his car with his cat, he goes in, and later when I was talking to him, I said, so what was wrong with the cat? And he goes, I really don't know. He never actually spoke with the vet except for a very quick phone call. And again, I think that's why I was stressing to do the video conferencing during the curbside, because it just is one more layer of richness that can, I think, maybe put you over the top with people being satisfied and creating value. So again, I think that don't just think people are going to be content and happy with you taking their pet, with a smile from their car, taking it in and bringing it back out and saying that'll be $150. I don't see this as sustainable for a lot of reasons.
Yikes. Okay, that is what I see for questions here. Dr. Ward, thank you so much. I have learned so much on my end over here. So I am sure those who are in business with you are absolutely amazed. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Well, I just want to thank you guys for attending. Thank Assisi Animal Health for sponsoring this. I mean, you guys are amazing. Please stay safe. These are times that I don't have words for anymore. I don't even know how to explain what I'm feeling. So I can only imagine what, you must be feeling as well, because we're really, every day it seems like there's another layer of anxiety. And I just really want you to take care of yourself, take care of your families. Make sure that you are giving yourself time to heal and repair, because I mean, this just continual infinite onslaught of negativity and stress is tough. And we are in a profession that we give and give and give and give until we absolutely have nothing left to give. And then it's over. And we just have to make sure that we are trying to repair and heal, because this is going to be going on for some time. So please be safe. If there's anything I can do, please let me know. Definitely thanks to Assisi Animal Health, and you guys stay safe.
Thanks, Dr. Ward.